Hey, payday, you want payday? I know that. I try to tell y'all when will y'all listen to me. Canelo Alvarez, he's been replaced. UFC, they have now officially confirmed they are taking over the Mexican dates. Riyadh season noche with the UFC at the Sphere, the newest venue, state-of-the-art venue, very unique in nature in Las Vegas. Now, let me break this down to you. UFC has announced that they're planning their first ever event at the Sphere in Las Vegas. What does this mean? Well, Dana White has been on record and he stated that if Canelo Alvarez does not fight David Benavidez, then he don't care. He gaffling them dates. Go in and gaffle the money and run to one of your aunt's cribs and borrow a damp dress and one of her blonde wigs. Tell her you need a place to stay. You'll be safe for days if you shave your legs with Renee's razor blades. Dana White, let me repeat that. Dana White said he's going to gaffle those dates. It's a jack move. It's a full-time jack move. He's taking the dates from Canelo Alvarez because Canelo, we know he's not fighting David Benavidez next. And fair play to the UFC. That's a big opportunity. The UFC is a business, and it just shows you the downward trend of Canelo Alvarez. And I told you for years now, the walls are closing in on Canelo Alvarez. He's made a lot of money in the game. He's done great things with his career, but I told you that window was shortening because he wasn't making a lot of the right moves. Him going to DAZN, none of his fights were classic on DAZN. And Canelo continues to show you who he is. He feels, I have a good resume, I've done this and that, and he tends to hold on to some of these accolades. If you listen to Canelo talk, he'll say stuff like, oh, when I beat Trout, or I fought Floyd when I was 23. Well, guess what? That was like 10 years ago. You're about 33 now. Things change. Boxing has always and will always be a what have you done for me lately type of sport. And fighting an undersized Jermell Charlo at 154 pounds, fighting, Jaime Munguia even, people were off it. And for real, Munguia wasn't the worst of his, if you look at his last 10 fights, it wasn't like Munguia was the worst. But I think people have grown tired of Canelo not listening to the public and the public demand and doing whatever he wants. So as a result, people are off it. And even though Munguia, again, wasn't the worst of his fights, because you have fights like Yildirim and things like that, people are just growing tired. And then the sport is also producing a bunch of new budding stars to pay attention to, rising stars and people who are kind of doing it right. And I told you this, Gervonta Davis is the face of boxing. His fights are far more entertaining than Canelo Alvarez, and he's getting viral knockouts. I don't even know when is the last time Canelo knocked out somebody like Frank Martin, when Tank just knocked out Frank Martin and hit a backflip. Maybe Amir Khan. I really don't know. I know he knocked out Caleb Plant, but Caleb Plant wasn't asleep with his eyes closed. He was just, it was a rightful stoppage. It was a nice TKO, but I'm talking about where you electrify the whole crowd like what Wilder did to Luis Ortiz, or, some of these Tank knockouts with Leo Santa Cruz or Rolly, things like that. So Tank has definitely went into that lane, and I believe he's the face of boxing. He's the most electrifying ticket, best bang for your buck in boxing right now in terms of an event, a show. It's going to be like a movie and guaranteed excitement. Canelo's star power is clearly fading, and I told you there's a couple different things at play, but a lot of it has to do with Canelo Alvarez and the people that he continues to choose to want to fight that the fans aren't really bequesting, and they're not really clamoring for these fights. There's rumors and inklings that Canelo could fight a guy like Edgar Berlanga. I don't know who really asked for that fight. Berlanga's been fighting Irishmen and people that you don't really know. A lot of people haven't kept up with his career. He was with Top Rank, didn't really have any prominent names there, got dropped on the Wilder Fury card. Then he's with Eddie Hearn, hasn't really enhanced his resume there. And it's funny because the Canelo Alvarez, the Cinnabons, the Chupapi Muñeños, they always, when it's a guy like at a time you want to see him fight, like Golovkin or David Benavidez, or even at 160, Jermall Charlo when he was active before he took long breaks and layoffs and DUIs and stuff like that. The Canelo fans always come up with these excuses like, why should Canelo fight Charlo? Why should he fight Andre? Why should he fight Benavidez? These guys, what have they done? They haven't done anything. And the Canelo man fans are famous for saying that and saying these things, but at the end of the day, they don't hold everybody to that extent, that same standard, exact standard. They don't say who is Avni Yildirim fought when Canelo fights him. They don't say who's John Ryder fought or Billy Joe Saunders, who also failed a banned substance test just like Canelo. They don't say these things. They don't say what has Edgar Berlanga done and why doesn't he get his resume up. If Canelo picks him, they'll just rock with it. The same way they did with Munguia and anybody else that hasn't been the number one pick from fans for Canelo to fight. So it's not a mystery that the UFC is probably seeing this. They're in Vegas, they have a business, and they're like, man, Canelo's not doing the same type of numbers. We taking over those dates. And Dana White said this. He said this at one of his press conferences. He says, if Canelo is not fighting David Benavidez, I'm taking that date back. Because that just goes to show you the UFC is looking at it as, if it ain't Canelo Benavidez, we don't care who we go up against in boxing, because that fight is the only fight that would make us think twice, because it would mess up our money if we had a competing event in Vegas on those Mexican dates. But Dana White knows, like I know, like I told y'all, Ego Stradamus strikes again, that Canelo's not going to fight David Benavidez next, even though Benavidez just beat Vodstick at 175. Benavidez is calling him out. Benavidez has the WBC and moved up to 75. But based on the performance that Benavidez had, there weren't enough vulnerabilities shown where it's really doubtful that Canelo will fight Benavidez next. So now the UFC, combined with Turkey Al-Sheikh and the Saudis, they have Riyadh Season Noche or something, and they're taking over the Mexican dates. So it just goes to show you that everything that Boxer Ego said was true. The walls have definitely closed in on Canelo Alvarez, because before, probably in his prime, you couldn't disrespect Canelo and then take his date because it would hurt your event. Now nobody even cares. And that's how you know that the star power is fading, when previously people used to respect. That's like, let's say Taylor Swift. Other artists know that Taylor Swift has such a big following that if you have an album coming out, you probably don't want to drop the same day as Taylor Swift, because she might dominate the charts, you know what I mean? And not everyone has money to buy multiple albums and things like that. And a lot of people stream it or whatever, but she does her thing. So you probably don't want to compete with that. Or if there's a big summer blockbuster movie back in the day, like Transformers or one of these Fast and the Furious movies, you don't want to necessarily contend with that. But if people are burnt out of the Fast and Furious movies and they didn't like the last few ones, now that will give people the confidence that, hey, our movie is a blockbuster too. We could compete with that. But in its prime, you probably didn't want to compete with the Fast and the Furious series on release date and release your movie. And that's the same thing that's happening right here with Canelo Alvarez. There was a point in time where people would steer clear of Canelo dates, but now the UFC doesn't even care, because they know he's not fighting Benavidez, and without Benavidez, his star power is going to continue to dwindle down, and people are showing less and less interest with his fights. People talk. So Dana White's in Vegas. He probably knows around what Canelo did, or, hear industry insiders talking about Canelo Munguia, and he's just in Vegas in general to see the crowd and see how many people, how the strip looks and things like that. And it's just a testament to how far Canelo has fallen in terms of star power. And it's because he keeps making the choices that he's making. Like I told you, this was going to happen. Saying stuff like, I don't care, I fight anybody, and I do what I want and stuff like that. You don't fight anybody because people are asking you to fight Benavidez and you won't do it. And now you're starting to suffer in terms of your numbers. So like I've been saying, the Canelo era looks about done. Unless he makes the right choice and fights Benavidez.